My name is Donncha Hughes. I'm an independent business advisor and trainer. I came across Derek O'Sullivan a few years ago on the New Frontiers programme in IT Tralee. So Derek, tell us a bit about Crua Outdoors.
Well, good to talk again, Donncha. We're based here in Tralee, and we design and develop a range of insulated tents, essentially. So, I suppose if you go back to the start, I used to spend a lot of time in tents. And, it sucks really, or it used to suck a lot of the time. You go, it's really too hot, too cold, it's very noisy, whatever the case may be. So I went looking for an insulated tent. I couldn't find one, and I was in the insulation game myself at the time, so we were insulating everything else. So I said, why not insulate a tent? And we did, and I thought there might be a commercial opportunity. So we kind of, posed the question to the market, generally through crowdfunding initially. And there seemed to be an appetite there, so we've kind of developed a range now at this stage. That was in 2015. We've developed a range of tents now, and we've kind of branched into industrial shelters as well for oil and gas applications and stuff like that. So it's been a steep learning curve, but here we are, I suppose, a couple of years later,
Cool. So I get to meet an awful lot of startup promoters, and crowdfunding generally comes up in the discussion at some point in time, particularly for early stage funding, and your name always comes up in the discussion. So you have a lot of experience in crowdfunding. Where did it start?
It started on Kickstarter, so it was great for a product-based company. It's a great way of putting the toe in the water and validating the idea. Will somebody actually pay for this? And that's the question that investors ask all the time. Has somebody bought it? And of course you can't develop them unless you have money. So it's kind of a chicken and egg scenario, and generally manufacturers would have minimum order quantities and all that kind of stuff. So we said, somebody suggested Kickstarter to me, so we started looking into it, and we felt it was a great fit. So we ran that first campaign in 2015, and it enabled us basically to finance our first production run. So that's kind of where it started really with Kickstarter. But that was our first campaign. We've had 3 Kickstarter campaigns now, and 3 Seedrs campaigns. So the Seedrs is where Kickstarter is a rewards base, so it's pre-orders, essentially it's pre-orders on the product, so it's sales. The Seedrs is something different. It's an equity crowdfunding forum, so it's a platform that allows you essentially to issue shares, so to bring investors into the business. So that's been a great fit for us as well, So crowdfunding has been good to us, I think I could safely say we wouldn't be here without it.
So going back to the early stage ones on Kickstarter, what were the rewards you were offering?
We were offering the tents, essentially. People pre-order the product itself. So the product has to be unique. There's a range of different rules for Kickstarter, but the product has to be unique. You have to have developed it yourself, etc. So we actually offered the tent itself, and we got people to pay up to $2,000 for a tent that was only really a drawing situation. We did have a prototype developed. You do have to have a minimum viable product, I guess. But the people took a leap of faith, and we delivered them all. And the other Kickstarter campaigns have been the same. It's just a new product every time, and we're just getting ready to launch a new hammock actually on Kickstarter this next month.
So even looking at that one, like €2,000 seems like a lot, or $2,000 or whatever it was. Was that the price of the actual tent?
It was at that stage. Now you generally will discount. So the incentive for people pre-ordering and not getting delivered for 6-12 months is that they get discounted. So the primary people on Kickstarter would be your early adapters. It's about 75% US based. Early adapters, it's 70-odd% male, men as well. So you need to know your target audience, and we've kind of learned that all since. The first campaign was very much just hit and hope for the best, whereas it's become more of a process now that we're more familiar with, and the marketing becomes much more central in it. And all the big campaigns you see, the $500,000 plus campaign, or even the $100,000 plus campaigns to an extent. But certainly once you go over $500,000 campaigns, they're big marketing efforts. So there's big marketing companies behind them now. The day of just making the amateur video and putting it on Kickstarter and raising your money that way is kind of gone. The bar has risen considerably.
So how much money did you raise the first time?
Just over €50,000.
Lovely.
And so that went well. The next one was just over €300,000, and we did €130,000 campaign last year. And we're looking to raise another one again, as I said, in the next couple of months. So we're hoping that should be our biggest campaign, the one that's on the way.
Cool. And I suppose the perception is that you bring a lot of the following to Kickstarter. Did you find that?
Very much, yeah. First of all, when you're setting up the campaign page, the video is crucial. So you need a properly produced video, and some thought needs to be put into that. The photos, the assets need to be, really professionally shot. So it needs to look the part, very much so. Then you dictate whether a campaign is going to work or not before launch. A lot of the work is done pre-launch, gaining your own audience and that kind of stuff, and gaining the interest. So you do have to bring a considerable amount. Kickstarter will help to an extent, but you don't rely. It's not a case of if you build it, they will come. That's not the way it works. You have to bring your own crowd to it. I mean, there's ways of getting yourself ranked further up in Kickstarter's rankings as well and stuff like that. But by and large, it's the responsibility is yours, and that's why you see Facebook being used quite a bit for Kickstarter ads. And like I said, all the big campaigns will use Facebook is by far the most effective direct response marketing for Kickstarter.
Cool. So the one that's coming next now is the hammock. How long a campaign? Number of weeks? We're going
to do probably a 60-day campaign. We've normally kept it shorter, but because we have a marketing effort, we're working with a company in Israel, in Tel Aviv that get involved at the early stages and help you, like all that, create the assets. We're actually shooting our video out there, that kind of stuff. So in this case, we're going to use it as more of almost a raw e-commerce solution. So you're going to be selling more while you're on there than while you're not, even though you won't have the ramp that you'll have at the start of a normal campaign. We prefer to just use it as a kind of an e-commerce strategy now, as part of our e-commerce strategy at least. So we'll go the longest they'll allow is 60 days, so we'll be something between 50 and 60 days.
Yeah. So that ramp at the start, that's interesting. How did you get on previous campaigns with that?
Not as well as we should have, to be honest with you. It's something we're aiming at this time. It's kind of half the reason we're using these guys. Sometimes you'll see some companies, have a huge ramp day one. I mean, I was just looking at a couple of campaigns recently that did, one of them did $232,000 in its first day. Now that was
beyond target.
Oh yeah, their target for the whole campaign was $50,000. So but they want to. You should be doing that anyway. You should keep your target down because the Kickstarter algorithm will pick up on successful campaigns. So you want to hit your target as quickly as possible. Maybe not quite that substantially, but and that's why you see even campaigns that will do know that they're going to do over $1 million. Their target is quite often $50,000 to $100,000. So it's kind of part of the game.
So you got some fantastic testimonials from people in the tent industry. How'd you go? Who'd you get, and how'd you go about getting those?
Well, we got a lot of testimonials at the moment from users because we've sold a few thousand tents at this stage. So we're very keen on trying to get the feedback from the users. We also use ambassadors. So we've probably an ambassador team of between 20 and 30 outdoor enthusiasts, and they'll do some work for us as well. And it's voluntary; they're not paid to do that or anything like that. But it's an industry. Ours in particular is an industry that people like to talk. If you know what I mean, people like to talk about the kit, and we just got an exceptionally good review on video sent to us last week by just a guy who just bought one of our Crua tries and put it up on YouTube himself, and we didn't even know about it except we kind of stumbled on it, So there's a good bit of that happening. When your e-commerce is our main focus now, we tried the brick and mortar thing, and it was just too expensive and too cumbersome. Like I was saying earlier with the trade shows, it just didn't work for us. So we've very much adopted an e-commerce strategy now. So online reviews are crucial in that world. You need to have. So we use Trustpilot, we use reviews in our own website. We're quite active in seeking reviews. Amazon as well. So we set up an Amazon store. And what we find with Amazon is that it's even if people don't buy it, especially in the US, if people don't buy on Amazon, they use it as a review source, as seen as an independent review source. So online reviews are a big part of it.
Yeah. So I suppose one of the things that really impressed me with your product actually is that, and reviews kind of show that, is it's actually a brilliant product. So what is it about, let's say, the original tents and the ones that come after it that really make it stand out?
Basically, the product is a tent that's insulated, so it insulates you from, I suppose we've all had experience in of being in tents when we were younger, and then we get to a certain age and we say, oh geez, no, it's too cold, or it's too hot, or it's too whatever you want to call it. So that was the problem I was trying to solve, because they were notoriously uncomfortable, you know. So we went a bit contrarian, you know. As you can see, our walls of our tents are quite thick. This is an inner tent that goes inside another tent. So we've kind of gone contrarian, but we solved the problem. So now you're a much more comfortable environment. So it's warmer in the cold weather. It's cooler in the hot weather. It's dampens noise in and out of the tent. It also is pitch black inside there, so a better night's rest. You know, there's a problem as well with camping, where once the sun comes up, it's totally bright inside the tent, and you have to get up, and you know, which is problematic with kids and stuff like that. So that's the problem we've solved. It's not for everybody. It's not going to be a tent, in particular in this case. This is only a 2-person tent, but it's not one you're going to throw over your shoulder and you know, go on a 2-week hike. But even though we are kind of looking at solutions for that, and that we've put talking to the market, that's why the inner tent is separate to the outer tent now. So in this case, the outer tent is that goes over this is only is less than 5 pounds weight. So actually, you can use the outer tent by itself when you want it, for those hiking trips when weight is a consideration, and then when comfort is a consideration, you put this into it. So again, I was kind of just using a bit of user feedback that we'd love to have them separate, and then it solves a couple of problems, because you know, tents are something that people use a couple of times a year, and a lot of people would have 3 or 4 different tents so they mightn't even use them all the time. So we're also allowing people to use the one product more than they would have beforehand, you know, for different applications.
Cool. So when you started off, say the first 1 or 2 Kickstarters, like I presume it's important to explain to people what you need the money for, that you're a startup.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go into much detail on that? Like, and what did you spend the money on then afterwards?
We spent the money on the first production run, really, or part thereof. It didn't cover it all, but it really helped us in raising more money, if you know what I mean. Because we validated that, look, people have spent money on these tents, which is a big thing when you're talking to investors. You can prove to them that, look, people have actually spent the money. Because it's easy, you know, when you're in the startup world, it's easy. You get a lot of pats on the back and pats on the head, and say, oh yeah, that's brilliant. But getting people to actually pay money for something is something very different. So that's what Kickstarter did for us. We were able to say it's not just talk, it's not just smoke and mirrors. People have done it. They've paid it. I mean, we could have probably done in that first campaign. We could have probably done a bigger amount if we kept the prices lower and stuff like that, because it's not an ideal price point for Kickstarter. Kickstarter is very much direct response marketing, so under $100 ideally, and then you're away in a hack, because people will you know, impulsively buy. Whereas in this case, you had to bring them back a few times, and retargeting and all that kind of stuff, which we know a bit more about it now, but we knew nothing about it then. So yeah, to answer your question, we used the money for our production run, that initial production run, and we were totally upfront with people. That's what it's kind of expected, you know, on Kickstarter. It really is the backers, let's call it, in Kickstarter, or the customers on Kickstarter. That's what they're thinking you're using it for anyway. They're thinking you want to fund your first production run, and they're the early adapters. They want to be the owners of one, so you need to create the noise about it that makes them want that, you know. So it works well with the Kickstarter customer.
So yours is a fairly involved product. How long does it take from the time you got the Kickstarter finished to actually delivering the goods?
It was longer than we thought it would be. It was about 8 months, and many trips to the factories and stuff like that. So we went through God knows how many prototypes before we actually got the one that works properly. And we were very conscious of, we didn't want to send out, especially with our very first production run, a set of products that didn't do what it said in the box. So we probably delayed it a little bit further ourselves until we knew we had it right. So it was probably 8 or 9 months, I'm guessing, or thereabouts. But people were okay with it. The big thing is communication, that you communicate with your backers and say, look, we're delayed, but this is why we're being delayed. What really will annoy backers after the campaign is if you go on radio silence and all of a sudden there's no communication at all, you know. So generally, even if people are annoyed by delays, they'll be okay once you're kind of explaining the thing along the way, and they don't think you're just after heading off to
So how many backers had you the first time?
We had
100.
over 100, yeah. We had about 120 or 30 again, I'm guessing. second time we had about 1,000, and this coming campaign again will be higher, I hope. So it's it's been a learning curve, but I think it's a really good tool for startup. It's one where the product person has the edge over the tech person. Everything else at the moment is tech software, tech. Whereas in our case, it was the product, and Kickstarter is for the product people. It's not something you're going to go on if you're developing an app or something like that, or a piece of software or software tool, or a piece of SaaS, that kind of thing. It's very much product based. You have to be able to show them the product, and that's the audience. They're product people. They're kind of gizmo people. So the ideal thing is a product that has a bit of tech in it, or at least a tech background where you're doing something different. So that's why it kind of fits for us. So
So I think the good news in Ireland is that there are more of those types of companies, and there's more of them looking at Kickstarter. So if someone was ringing you up and said, Derek, give us 3 things that we should be looking at in our campaign that we should absolutely need to do, what would you do?
I would say the first thing is make sure that you're developing something that people want, and not something you think they want. So I would talk to the world. The best way to do that is a landing page, a pre-launch landing page, and you can ask people if they're interested in this, if they are, sign up here. So you're starting to build your database, and that can be done quite cheaply. You can drive as much traffic as you want to do. A lot of the big campaigns now will spend probably 10 grand on Facebook ads pre-launch just to see if they're on the right track, because they don't want to be halfway up the wrong ladder. And then they'll do another set of landing pages, and they'll figure out the price point that people are willing to pay for such a product. So it's quite an involved process before you even start. So that's the first thing. I think make sure that you're as confident as you can be that there's interest in your product, and you can drive the right type of traffic using Facebook. You can drive, in our case, we generally drive people that are into Kickstarter and the outdoors or camping or hiking or whatever the case may be. So you can do whatever suits your product. But I would say they need to be familiar with Kickstarter, because there's no point in trying to convince people to back you with a new product and then try to explain to them what Kickstarter is. So the best type of traffic is Kickstarter traffic. Then the next thing would be the video. The video is crucial. It really is. That's what people watch. I'd say the rest of the page, it's why it's checked maybe one scroll, but down at the bottom of the page, I would say it is probably only a 5% of the people make it to the bottom of the page. So the video is really the make or break, and there's people need to know on your video what your product is and what problem it's solving and why they have to have it within the first 20 seconds, I would say. So you don't start your video like we did our first video, telling the customer about your company and why you're doing this and all of that. They don't care. They want to know if your product is something that they want. Get to the point, and then you can tell them about the company at the end of the video. But get to the point and hook them that way, because it's very much just a direct response.
An ideal time for the video?
It depends on who you ask. A lot of people were saying recently to me that in e-commerce world, videos, 90 seconds, 60 seconds, down to 30 seconds. I think in Kickstarter the video needs to be as long as it needs to be. We were talking to the Israeli company I was telling you is doing our video this time around, and I asked them that. I said, we should probably need to keep this video below 90 seconds, do we? And that's exactly what they said to me, and they've run a lot of 7-figure campaigns, so they know what they're doing. They're probably the best in the world at doing what they do, and their answer to that question was, get to the point as quick as you can in your video, but then after that the video needs to be as long as it needs to be. So especially if it's a more I suppose detailed purchase, where people need to take a little bit more of a look. So I would say, but I would say you wouldn't want to be going much over 3 minutes with a video. I would say try and keep the sweet spot about 3 minutes. But if it needs to be 3 minutes, then it's 3 minutes. I don't think it needs to. You need to cut it out just to entertain people.
Yeah. So we're looking at 3 things. So the first one is landing page, do your research. Second one is the video. Third one.
The third one is during the campaign you need to realise that you're, as we said earlier, it's not if you build it they will come. You have to be driving traffic to the campaign page. Now there's some marketing companies that will do that for you. Some are good and some are crap, so you need to really get to the bottom of it and basically talk to people that have used. The good ones have no problem. They'll tell you, look, these companies have used this in the past, and even if you research, you'll find anyway, because most of the marketing companies put their name on the bottom of the campaign page. So, or if you want to do that yourself, that's fine as well. But there are really specialised companies that do this, and I think that you should, if you want a big campaign, you should consider one of them to drive the traffic. And then obviously you get the PR. People will pick up on it. Some people again use PR companies. I think my opinion on that is very mixed. It's very hit and miss with paying a PR company, because they generally charge a lot, and you can't really analyse. I like data, and I like being able to say, at least you drove the traffic, the conversion rates. Not, it's very hard with PR. So I would say look for the free PR. There's plenty of gadget websites out there that will cover it. So find them. Make sure that you tell them this is coming. Try to embargo them so that it goes off on day one. And and they're willing to if it's in, especially if it's in your sphere. So the ideal one for us, for instance, would be an outdoor title that brings new products to their audience all the time, and for that to come out at the right time. So I would say don't think that Kickstarter is going to do the work for you, because it's not. You have to drive the traffic.
So brilliant.
And that's the same with Seedrs and all the platforms, by the way, the equity crowdfunding platforms too. They're not going to do it for you.
Yeah. So that was going to say, you got the Kickstarter and all of that done, and then you decided to go with Seedrs or equity crowdfunding. Where did that come out of, and how did you start it?
Basically, it was again funding. We decided we were getting a knack or a little bit. We knew a bit more about crowdfunding, and what I like about equity crowdfunding, anybody that's tried to raise money for a business, a lot of it is waiting and meetings and this. Whereas this way, you were taking it into your own hands. So we ran our first campaign and we raised about 70k sterling, and then our subsequent campaign, we just closed the campaign, our third campaign, that raised about 270k sterling. So it's you can raise that kind of money. It's not massive money, relatively speaking. It is to us, but in the venture capital world, it's not massive money, but it's that kind of working capital money, especially in our case, because pre-ordering we have to upfront the cost of the product well in advance. So again, for a growth company, product-based growth companies tend to be money hungry, cash hungry, because if you want to build your revenue year on year, you need more money for stock essentially. So that's why it's a good way for us to kind of raise that money for stock, along with Kickstarter, obviously, in the pre-order process there. So we kind of talked to a couple of the platforms. We use Seedrs. It's Crowdcube is probably the other big one, and the UK is the preeminent nation, I suppose, of equity crowdfunding. They do it in the US, but they can't complete. It's more like a dating agency instead of an actual wedding, if you know what I mean. They'll put you together with the American platforms, but in Seedrs act as the nominee, and Seedrs will complete all the paperwork for you and everything. So once it closes, it's pretty seamless. So it just suits us. And again, there's a lot of work. You get on the plane back and over to the UK in particular in this case, and you just make sure you get in front of as many people, and they have pitching events as well and stuff like that you should always volunteer to do. So that it was just a good fit for us. So again, we had a visual product that we could show people, which helps as well in these cases. I mean, they're small investors. On Seedrs, we've people that have invested everything from £30 to £30,000. So it's an open round for so long. Again, the maximum is 60 days. If you hit your target within 60 days, you can leave it open as long as you want them, but you have to hit it within 60 days. And again, I'd be conservative in my target and just exceed it is always the best bet there.
So how did you decide on the level of equity?
Really, there is no set. It's not overly equity sensitive is the first thing I would say, because nobody's going in there with a huge amount of money, relatively speaking. So you'd set, and there's no right and wrong answer to that. I set what we felt the first campaign was. We were raising a bigger round. It was part of a bigger round, and we set it at the same valuation as what the rest of the round was being done at, and people seemed happy with that. Then you basically from there you justify raising the value by what we've done since. And then we went up again with the last campaign, the same thing. We just said, look, since the last campaign, we've done X, Y, Z. And we've done a lot of work on the industrial side of the business and the industrial blast shelters and stuff like that. So we were able to justify the raise in valuation. But we still kept it fair, you know, you can't.
So generally you're talking like 10-12% kind of starting off, is that?
Yeah, our first round was at $1 million valuation, the second was at 2 and the third was at 3. So we kind of went up like that, and they were within, especially the second and third campaigns, because they were only 8 months apart. So, but we were able to justify it because we had done what we said we were going to do in the second campaign, you know. So you just, you know, it's kind of common sense really, because there's no formula in valuing any business. You know, you hear some cases where businesses are valued at a certain value, and you say, how can that be? You know, they haven't sold a thing, they haven't developed anything, but they're able to raise huge amounts, you know, many millions of euro or pounds, and they're paid to them. You know, if the market takes it, you know, then the market takes it. So I would say for the smaller amounts on Seedrs, you know, it's not, once you're not crazy with your valuation, it's not overly sensitive to.
So you've a fair bit of equity given away, so like through it, have you?
We have, we have, we've probably given away 20% in total, yeah.
And is each round diluting?
Yes. So they'll dilute themselves, but they also have preemption rights, so they have the right to bring their percentage, let's say, back up to what it was pre-campaign, and some of them will take that up and some won't. They'll just allow dilution. Yeah. So it's not just I suppose us as the main shareholders that get diluted. Everybody gets diluted.
Yeah. So I suppose the key thing really with investment is like you prepare the investment documents. Mm-hmm. So what kind of documentation is required as part of the?
They do the due diligence before the campaign, so it's all done pre-campaign. So if you put, you know, that we sat here this evening, you have to prove it. So that might be as simple as an email thread or whatever the case may be, but you have to prove everything that goes on their platform. They have to see proof for because the financial regulator in the UK could go and does go in and ask them to prove everything that's on a campaign page in some cases. So you just need everything that's on there. You need to have proof for it, basically. So and it's up to you. You create the page yourself, but you need to make sure that anything you put on there, they won't let kind of wishy-washy stuff on there, or kind of stuff that suggestive stuff, if you know what I mean, that we're going to close a such and such a deal in the next 2 or 3 months, something like that. They wouldn't allow on there unless you had something concrete to back it up, you know. So it's quite an extensive due diligence process. But I mean, it's fair, you know.
Yeah. And in terms of the financials, like, did they go through that with a fine-tooth comb as well then?
No, not in the you mean the projections and all that kind of stuff? No, they'll because they're their projections essentially. So they're you know, how you can justify them or whatever really is kind of up to yourself, and that's the story that you have to convince. Not the story, the path, I suppose, that you have to convince the investors of, that look, here are our projections, and here's how we're going to get there. And most of the, you know, practically all of the bigger investors on Seedrs, they're pretty savvy people. You know, they'll ask the right questions when it comes to that kind of stuff, and what kind of money you're projecting into the future. So you need to be realistic in that too. Obviously, you know, there's a balance because you know, people say you need to be realistic, but you also need to show ambition, and others will hit you that you're not being ambitious enough with your figures. So you need to be kind of make sure that you have an answer both ways on that. But I think I would have somebody if you're not particularly financially savvy in putting those kind of documents together, I would definitely have somebody look at them that is. You know, even if you have to pay somebody, because this goes out in the public sphere, so you have to make sure that you're not just leaving yourself open there to be walloped. Because again, in the end, any questions that are asked of those figures are asked in the public page, so it can be seen by everybody. So the last thing you want to do is somebody highlighting something that's totally wrong on there, and you don't have an answer for it essentially. Yeah. You know.
So I don't know. I haven't come across too many of these campaigns in depth, like to the level you have. So. Forgive the questions, but how does the investor basically ask those questions? Is it a public, or are you talking like some of the guys are going to give 30,000? Did they get a private pitch, or?
We've had people invest that kind of money without ever even talking to us, believe it or not. There was, and then I've any of the others. Then you'd kind of, some of them I've gone to London to meet. That I'd go over and try and arrange a few meetings with the Seedrs pitches. They arrange some pitches themselves in Seedrs HQ, and like I said, I'd always volunteer to do that. You should get FaceTime with the investors when you can. But it's some people don't want to do that if they like the product. And I contacted that particular guy who was a Swiss guy, and I just said, one of them was a Swiss guy, and I just said, thank you, kind of basically. I found him on LinkedIn. He made his profile public, and he said, well, no problem, I'm a camper, I know the problem you're solving. That was it, one line. That was all the contact I ever had with him. So, and I suppose it's all relative. It may not be a lot of money to him, it is to us, obviously, but it may not be a huge amount of money to him. And then you have that, and then you have other people that could question you, and they might end up investing 50 quid, so you don't know, you just don't know. Yeah. But you do have access on that point. If any live campaign, you have access. Once you set up your own Seedrs account, you have access to their to the current investors in the current live campaigns, and some of them will make their profile public and may even have their LinkedIn handle or a link to their LinkedIn page on there. So it's a great way before launching the campaign of making yourself known to 100 or 200 active Seedrs investors and say, look, we're launching and here is a bit more information. And again, that's all pre-campaign, so I would recommend that you would be doing that as well.
Good. Anything else we want to add on the general topic of crowdfunding?
Not hugely. I mean, I'm a big fan of crowdfunding, obviously, but I think it's very it's a great tool. It's a great possible tool for people, for startups, because it's a lot of the stuff, like I said, when you're dealing with raising money for startups, a lot of the stuff is out of your hands. You're kind of waiting, whereas this way empowers the startup itself to be proactive. Okay, you may not at the start raise a huge amount of money, but it certainly is a certain amount of money, and it's attractive for investors to show that you're doing that and you're being proactive about it. So instead of sitting in an office and giving out that this person won't invest or that person won't invest, you have an opportunity to actually be proactive and go out there, be it on Seedrs or Kickstarter, whichever, and put the wheels in motion. But you can be yourself. You don't blame anybody else. You go and you have these tools are there. They'll bring the people to it, and I think it should be used. It should be a lot more widespread than it is. It's still relatively early stage, I guess, for crowdfunding, but I think that it's really ramping up in certainly the rewards-based crowdfunding is really ramping up. Kickstarter, Indiegogo now are huge platforms. I think equity will follow in a slower manner just because of the nature of it. But I think there's massive opportunity for startups to use it to their advantage. So I think it should be considered if your product base suits it.
Crua Outdoors has been really successful. So just in terms of headline numbers, how many employees have you got at this stage? What's the turnover? Well,
Yeah, we've five kind of full time, but we outsource a lot of the expertise. Just because we want to keep the fixed overheads down initially, but also because we're finding in e-commerce, which is our kind of business, or the way we're slanting the recreation side of the business anyway. That we need certain expertise in certain areas, like Google AdWords, for instance, where we don't have, we wouldn't have the financial capability of bringing somebody in house just for that, but we can outsource, so many hours a month. Similar with email marketing and all that kind of stuff. So we kind of use specialists, because I'm really finding that there's no one size fits all with this. You need to find people that are really, really good at their niche in e-commerce. So that's that's kind of where we're going with that, and that's why we have a relatively small in-house team. We also employ somebody in the US. We do some distribution out of upstate New York, where there were some investors involved as well. So Saranac Lake up in the Adirondacks in New York. So we employ Dylan up there, who does our sales and operations, which is a lot of it is shipping and that kind of stuff. In the warehouse. But he'll also do some of the sales work and stuff like that over there. So that's kind of the way we go with that, and it's growing. Yeah, I mean, turnover this year relative to 2017 relative to 2016 would have tripled, and this year we're looking at probably tripling that again. you know, so it's definitely going in the right direction, you know. Yeah.
So other suppose headline, how many products have you got now?
We have a SKU range now of 20 odd, I guess, at this stage, you know, and we're adding 4 or 5 to that again through this upcoming Kickstarter campaign.
And presumably you've sold across the world, across a number of countries.
About 43 countries, yeah, about 43 countries. So, and we're launching a new blast-resistant tent for the oil and gas industry. So we've put up one in Saudi Arabia, and there's a few more going to a big company called Bechtel in the US. There are 3 more then on the way there. So that's an interesting opportunity that arose along the way. So we think there's a big opportunity.
I don't think I have any more questions. It's been very useful from my point of view because it's a few years since we touched base.
Yeah.
I see all the campaigns. I haven't actually bought one yet. But so the cool thing about Kickstarter, all the campaigns still stay there, and you can go and check them out.
You can check them out, yeah. You can, and you can put on a link to your own website there. So if people are still interested, they purchase here, and they can. So you still control the page yourself. So you can add in you can't change the description once the campaign closes, but you can up at the top. You can you kind of shape it differently, so they're sending people to your website.
And the more conventional investment funding, is that something you're looking at as well now? Or?
Yeah, we are. We're considering setting up our own manufacturing facility. Our capability here, because supplying, all the usual supplier problems and timelines and upfront. So we're talking to a few institutional investors that may be interested in helping that happen. So it's kind of busy times, but hopefully we're going in the right direction.
That's a lot of money, is it?
Yeah, it would be a lot of money. It would be big, it'll be a seven-figure number anyway. So we're just wondering what the best way is to shape that and do that and bring in the kind of money we want to bring in, or the kind of investors we want to bring in, are smart investors. So they're very they're linked into especially that oil and gas world. So it would be smart money, I suppose, is what they call it. So it's worth considering. So hopefully that's by the end of 2018 we'll have kind of at least started our own the motions in putting our own production facility together.
Cool. So obviously you're headquartered in Tralee here in County Kerry. What's that been like?
It's been brilliant. We're an Enterprise Ireland client from the start, from when we met you, or you met us first, or me first, I suppose, in the New Frontiers program, which like I was saying, I can't say enough about those kind of initiatives. I describe those kind of initiatives to people overseas, and they say that can't be really serious, but that's actually there. So I think there's a massively good infrastructure in Ireland for startups. And then we went from there to CSF, so we're now a HPSU, so we really went through the whole Enterprise Ireland thing, or whatever you want to call it. So it's been great for us, and obviously this is an Enterprise Ireland building in conjunction with the IT here. So we've stayed very much in the Enterprise Ireland family, I guess, if you want to call it that. But it's been great. I mean, they've set up a lot of. We use their overseas offices a lot. Dubai, Austin, in Texas. It's been very good for us. The guys in the Nordics have been very good to us, So it's been amongst others, of course. So it's been great for us. I mean, you couldn't say it. I always defend Enterprise Ireland and these kind of initiatives to the hilt.
Yeah. And so the last question, just general interest, work-life balance.
Very difficult. That's why I should be at home putting the kids to bed now. I promised I'd be home to put the kids to bed tonight. So I'll try and get in with the match attacks. And because I was away the last couple of days in London, as I was saying, so it's difficult, and you need to make time for yourself, which is the most difficult, because it tends to be family. For me, I have 3 small kids under 6, and my wife works full time as well. So it is difficult, and it's difficult to get away from the habit of the emails at night and all that kind of stuff. But I think you have to, otherwise you crack yourself up. You really do. And it's not sustainable in the long run. You just stick with it. And I've done that too. You go get up to one of the kids during the night and bring your phone with you so you can return emails at 4 a.m. That kind of nonsense. So you definitely need to get started. And I'm getting better. I'm trying to get it back into. Sport was a big part of my life before this, but I totally neglected the gym and everything. So I'm trying to get back into that and have something else outside of work. But it's difficult. There's no doubt about it. It is difficult, because you'll always prioritise, or you should probably always prioritise family, work, and then your own time. And so it's always a key. But I think it's important to get that balance, at least some element of the balance.
Yeah, very good. Well, on behalf of all the people who might potentially watch the video, we want to thank your kids for lending some of your time to us and keep going forward.
No problem. Glad to talk.
Thank you.
Anytime. No bother.